Covering international cricket and the world of pro wrestling. This is Stumps and Bumps on SEN with Eric Bischoff and Bharat Sundaresan.
Well, hello and welcome to Stumps and Bumps. I'm Bharat Sundaresan, and this week it feels like a full house because we have the legendary Eric Bischoff back with us. So Nims is not just you and me. So before we go anywhere further, welcome back, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. It seems like it's been forever since I was here last, and I apologize to you guys certainly and to the fans of the show. I know consistency is one of the keys to making a show like this grow and perform the way we want it to. And I felt horrible last week, but in the United States, we have a variety of holidays like everybody else in the world. Thanksgiving holiday is traditionally the one holiday with the busiest amount of travel, much more so than Christmas or any other time of year. So we had holiday travel, Thanksgiving travel, on top of a recent government shutdown, which drastically affected flight schedules. And then on top of that, we had a blizzard, which had a significant impact on the main airport hubs. So between all that, I ended up missing, I think, 4 connections and 1 flight over the course of 6 or 8 days, and my schedule was completely turned upside down. But I apologize, and thanks for, I'm sure, doing. The show might have been better without me. I don't know. Come on.
I definitely do
No
not
way.
think that. Absolutely not with that one. But Bharat, for those that are watching on YouTube, they might notice that. Hang on a second, is Bharat still at his hotel? The Test match is finished and done and dusted. Have you also had some travel issues?
But self-imposed. I just slept right through my alarm. I generally set 3 alarms. I know what I did. The biggest mistake I did was I thought I was a conventional guy. I packed last night. I kept the clothes that I wanted to wear for the flight ready, which is something I've never done before. And I think that's what I paid for. Like, yeah, my system just went, no, this can't be right. And then I woke up at 5:45 for a 6 o'clock flight. Yeah, I don't think it works out.
No, unfortunately. You haven't yet mastered the art of, going at the speed of sound when it comes to air travel. But you are in Brisbane for a reason, because you were there covering the Test match for SEN cricket, where England have been well and truly pantsed, and they've been exposed in just 6 days. The Ashes is all but lost for the tourists. And Bharat, were you shocked that... well, first off, it did look like there was a bit of a fight, because Ben Stokes, the captain of England, looked like he'd all of a sudden thought, no, I'm not going to do this rubbish Bazball stuff, and I'm actually going to go back to the fundamentals and actually play some proper cricket.
He did, and I think he sent a strong message, and it was a statement to the rest of the team that, as he said later on, he said his dressing room. 2 things he said, and it's rare to hear a captain of any professional sporting team say that about his team in men's sport anyway. He said, you can't win in Australia with weak men, and my dressing room has no room for weak men. That's a strong thing to say about your team, especially when it's a team which is almost cult-like, the way they have built this up. We've spoken a lot about Bazball over the last few weeks on our show. And it's been built around, hey, you do you, we'll take care of you, we'll back you to the hilt. And that's what this whole philosophy, no fear of failure, run towards the danger, and all these buzzwords we've heard from the English. But just seeing Ben Stokes' body language post-game, and especially the press conference, you could see that this has really hurt him. It's personal. And I would be surprised if a lot of those players haven't been pulled aside for a serious chat. I almost felt like there's been a huge shift. That whole attitude that they had carried with them for the last 3 years is gone. And Eric said it best a few weeks ago. He said, eventually the math sorts it out. And when you're 0-2 down in a 5-match series, when all this expectation was around, you are the best English team in a long time to come and not just beat Australia, but to teach them a lesson. And then you've been left with your tail in between your legs. Not surprised that that's how it's ended up.
This is
Well, if I may, what was the motivation? What was the catalyst for Bazball? What Why? Why was it introduced? What was the theory behind it?
The theory, Eric, was so 4 years ago when England last came here for the Ashes, they got so badly beaten. And English Test cricket has always had this air of cynicism, pessimism. They've been very conservative in the way they've played Test cricket. And because they were beaten so badly here, and then they went to the Caribbean and were embarrassed even further, they just brought in this new coach from New Zealand who had never coached a national team called Brendon McCullum. Uh, that's Brendon Baz, and that's how Bazball was born. And it just felt like at that point, English cricket needed something new. I mean, I called it, to use the Shawshank Redemption line, it was their get busy living or get busy dying moment. And they just felt like we are losing. And not only are we losing, we're playing like our country has lost faith and we've lost face here. So they just needed something drastic. And so Brendon McCullum comes in and says, hey, let's not worry about conventions. We'll bat faster than anyone else. We'll just try to finish the games off in 3-4 days. And even the selection process has changed, Eric, where selections were based on vibes. There's a one spin bowler that they picked because they saw him bowl well on a Twitter clip. So the whole notion changed, and it seemed to work for the first 18 months or so, where it was all about bravado. It was a lot like, a heel faction, which is just come into being, where when they would lose, they would still talk about, we still won the moral right. So this is a moral victory for us. And as you know, Eric, it works. But when you start losing in sport, you're not that entertaining. I mean, it's like if you pin me in the ring 1, 2, 3, and then I get up and cut this great promo, people are going to be like, yeah, that's odd. And that's where we have ended up with Bazball.
Do you think is there a school of thought to suggest that baseball just needs more time? Players need to get used to the game, that it might still be a good strategy? Because from the sounds of it, from an outsider's perspective, it sounds like things that would typically pick up the pace of the game, make it perhaps more interesting for the viewer at home to watch. And, when I think of, most sports other than perhaps tennis or golf have all been affected greatly. The format of the game itself has been affected greatly by television. So as we first started talking about baseball and its implications and how it's played and people's reaction to it, in my mind, I'm thinking as a television producer, yeah, but that might be just what this sport needs, is a fresh take.
The part where the part though where it sort of the snake starts eating its own tail is, you're right, it makes compelling television. However, it doesn't make compelling television when you're promised 5 days and you can only deliver the 2. Because you've got to the point of, we've gone out completely swinging. The best way, and Bharat, you might agree with me here, because I'd argue that it's almost ruined or ruining a generation of English cricketers. Because, for example, if we go back to professional wrestling, because as you know, everything always has to come back to professional wrestling. There is a generation of wrestlers that we see now and sports entertainers that think, we need to do the high spots. We need to jump off things. We need to go think. Whereas when you watch someone like a Randy Orton or a John Cena, and we'll touch on this a little bit later on, it's the things that they don't do. They make the audience want it. They give it breath. They give it times to breathe. Bazball is, I think I said it to you, Bharat, it's like Crash TV. It's the sort of thing that Vince Russo tried during the Attitude Era, which worked at a moment, because because it gets people talking. It's the look at all the stuff that we're doing, bang, 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 and by comparison, everyone else looks just boring and dull. But then eventually you realize, no, we need a bit of substance here. We need a bit more than the flashy highlights. If we're going to go a full 5 days here, it needs to be able to sustain that 5 days.
I mean,
I never thought. Well, I'm sorry. I was going to say, Nims, I never thought I'd hear the day where I would hear cricket being analyzed in the same context as Vince Russo's Crash TV. We have clearly broken intellectual and creative ground here on the
show. And I was going to say the same, Eric. I never thought we'll hear the name Vince Russo on our show. But you know what? Vince Russo's run at WCW and the height of Bazball I think both lasted 18 months. Maybe Vince Russo lasted less than 18 months. Maybe it felt like 18 weeks at best. But and it's exactly that. It's a sugar hit. It was a sugar hit that English cricket needed at that point. But the what happened was at that point, uh, everybody started drinking from the same Kool-Aid, not just the players, but the media. And I remember English journalists, some of whom are very good friends of mine, telling me in 2023, hey, if the rest of the world doesn't do what we're doing, Test cricket's dying. We are setting the new trend and we are the trendsetters. And all of us from Australia and elsewhere said, all right, let's see how long it goes on for. And which is exactly what that crash TV style of wrestling wasn't it, Eric? Where they said, oh, all this old school stuff that you guys are doing, old school long-term storytelling that Eric Bischoff believes in, doesn't matter. Just give everyone an angle or a sort of story on every show and crash bang wallop and it'll work. And well, it did for a while and then it didn't.
Yeah, the parallels are uncanny for sure.
And the funny thing too is when Crash TV was tried to be instilled in WCW in late 1999, by that time the WWE already thought, okay, that worked for the bit. Now we got to go back to what we actually know what we're doing, because we saw the long-term storytelling was back. The Triple H, Cactus Jack, Mick Foley saga. All of a sudden, then we saw the rise of the Kurt Angle up against The Rock. Then you had that exodus of household names that WCW went and built, that knew that, hang on, we're not built for this crash bang wallop sort of rubbish that's happening here. So we'll go over here where they're actually doing the stuff that we want. And like you said, Eric, the numbers balanced out, and you saw that, okay, while that sugar hit did get you over the line a little bit, and Bharat, you summed it up perfectly. Everyone was drinking the Bazball Kool-Aid. Everyone was thinking, he has reinvented the wheel. Oh, the Messiah. This is everything that we need. Finally, it's arrived. Before finally the numbers caught up, and we're seeing it right now where we're going to go into this Adelaide Test match where a man's job's on the line, basically.
It is, and it's very clear from everything we're hearing from England that if they lose this Adelaide Test, so initially they thought they'll come and win the Ashes, but now it's come down to if you don't win a live test, because obviously the Adelaide Test as of now is live, but if Australia win that, you have two dead rubbers to look forward to in Melbourne and Sydney. Then what's the point, right? Yes, England haven't won a single Test match in 15 years on Australian soil, but this English team, everything, because they've got everything they've asked for, any player they've asked for. They've gotten rid of players that were legends of the game of England cricket. They went up to James Anderson last year and said, I don't think you were going to work in Australia. So get off. And they're pissed off. They've called former English cricketers captains. They've called them has-beens. So they've targeted, like they've created so many enemies in that sense around English cricket. So everybody's been waiting there, sharpening their knives, waiting for when this time will come. And now, after the two, the way they've been humiliated, and the record for the number of days in which an English team has lost the Ashes is 11. So far, we've across two Test matches, we've had 6 days of cricket. So if the Adelaide Test is over in 3 or 4 days, then this will be the shortest time it would have taken for an English team to lose the Ashes series in that sense. So a lot riding on it for them, and people are waiting. I mean, I think Jared Waitley, he called it our own Jared Waitley said they're standing on the edge of the plank. But not only are they standing on the edge of the plank, there are, I think, 1,000 Englishmen just standing there and going, all right, are they going to fall on their own, or do we need to give them the nudge to fall the cliff?
Eric, you would also notice.
How do you think it affect the morale of the team? If and it doesn't sound like Bazball has been officially declared dead yet.
Not yet.
It sounds like it's going to be soon. What do you think that will do to the morale of the team? The people that have the players who have embraced it, who believed in it, who talked about it, maybe more so than they really should have, because now they're having to pay the check. But how do you think it's going to affect the morale of the team, and how do they play going forward?
No, I think it's difficult for them to turn the clock back now, Eric. I mean, they're so committed to that style of play, and which is what was interesting that Brendon himself, as the coach the other day, his press conference, or he spoke to the broadcasters, and he spoke about how maybe they didn't, because the former cricketers have said they didn't train enough, they didn't prepare enough. And he said, no, we actually overtrained. So that line has not gone down well at all. The fact that they've lost, and he's saying that we should not have been preparing as much as we were.
That's one way to look at
it. And then the captain comes out, Ben Stokes, and says, and they're very good at throwing these promo lines. He said, it's not about training to train, it's about training to dominate. And all that is well and good, but if you're not winning and if your players are not performing, and what it has done is, I'll go one step further. There are some legends in this team, and Joe Root, who's now finally made that 100, and Ben Stokes. But then there are also some cricketers who are mediocre at best. So the Bazball philosophy worked for them because you took away the fear of failure and you said, we'll back you to the hill, which is great, which is actually what you would expect. If every sporting team had that attitude, it'll work. But it'll only work to a point, and the players have been found out now, Eric. And the other irony is now this is like pre-planned. So they've gone to Noosa, which is probably one of the most sought after holiday destinations in Queensland, for a 3-day vacation when they're 0-2 down. So the optics of it aren't very good. So the only thing that has happened, speaking of flights, is all the English journalists, rather than go to Adelaide, they've all gone to Noosa, because this is when the big stories are going to break out. So watch out. So the paparazzi is there. And this is going to be a testing time for all of them, because they're there to have a good time for at least 2 or 3 days. But there'll be cameras everywhere. So all those backpacker bars and pubs there'll be cameras everywhere just waiting for them.
Oh, I can't wait for the social media.
Oh, that is going to be something that will be interesting. And look, the markets have really swung too, because last week it was $1.25 for Australia to win the Ashes, and England was just $3.10, with the draw last week at only $12. This week it has swung to Australia being $1.04 favourites, where England has blown out to $19 to win.
Wow.
And the draw is $26. So there's not a lot of faith in the English to get this done. But before we quickly put a bow on the slaughter that was at the Gabba, Eric, I wanted to ask you, because you know what it's like to have the sharks come at you when things don't go right. And Brendon McCullum at the moment is probably the most targeted man, because everyone needs a face for when things are going wrong. There's a million faces when things are going right. Everyone's more than happy to put their hand up and say, oh, it's all because of me. But when things start going south, all of a sudden it's like, no, it's you that did this. What's some of the tactics that he could probably do to effectively block out the noise?
I am not an expert on that subject. Well, at least not an expert on succeeding to turn out the noise, because the noise is, look, we're all human beings. I think, for me personally, because I've been in a fairly high profile position within wrestling for a long time, and naturally it's professional wrestling, so it comes with a lot of criticism. It's the nature of the product, particularly when someone like me, who portrays a heel character and in real life actually does own the company, it makes it even more intricate, so to speak. I have learned over time to do a pretty good job turning all that off. And part of the reason is basically getting a better understanding of social media in general. And what I've learned, and has been subsequently supported by some decent research, I think, is that 10% of the audience for your product makes 90% of the noise on social media. So it's very easy to start leaning into social media responses, good or bad, and believing that that's how the majority of the people feel based on what you're reading in social media. So if it's positive and it confirms pre-existing biases or opinions, you really, really believe it, right? You see it, I know. But if it's negative, which more often than not, the people that post on social media, the reason they post is because it's an outlet for them to get attention. It's a dopamine hit. It's psychology, and it's pathology, actually, because you're reaching out with these negative comments, knowing that people are going to respond most to those. People generally don't respond to positive comments. They do respond more frequently to negative comments. So what I remind myself when I see a post that may get under my skin is just remind myself that it's not the real world.
Mm.
It's a small percentage of a very lopsided world that doesn't represent the opinion of your mass audience. And that helps from time to time, but it can still bother you. You get frustrated. It doesn't hurt my feelings. I don't get angry necessarily, but it is frustrating. And you just, like I said, have to remember who you're listening to.
Hmm.
And just on that, Eric, I mean, there's the social media side to it, but I've heard you speak on your excellent podcast, 83 Weeks, over the years when you did create the NWO, the cool heels, and suddenly the heels were being cheered. So the old school wrestlers or the others in the company were going, hang on, but that's not how we did things. And I'm sure there was some resistance from them. So how do you deal with that, Eric? So it worked out for you, the NW worked and you were successful. But when you're challenging tradition in that sense, and you're sort of, even though if you're not doing it intentionally or directly, when you are saying that now what you did worked in your time, but this is where the world is. How do you find that fine balance between that?
It was very difficult in the beginning, but what made it easier as time went on was the success that everybody was seeing each and every week. When we as a company went from, producing our television show in front of 1,500 people, when 500 of them got free tickets, and they came in with their bottle of wine in a brown paper bag and fell asleep at ringside, because the only reason they came was to get out of bad weather, right? To go from that kind of environment to 15,000 fans, spending real money. It's hard to argue a formula that's creating so much success so fast, and it's undeniable. So the conversation started out very difficult, but got much easier in a relatively short period of time. Then it was just a matter of adjusting, because you got to keep in mind when we went from the traditional wrestling formula to the cool heel kind of formula, that changed the theatrics of professional wrestling. It changed the psychology of professional wrestling, so much so that the baby faces, the protagonists in this scenario, didn't know how to tell their story, because their opponent, who typically, from a storytelling point of view, was the antagonist, people booed them. Now people are cheering them. Well, as a baby face, how do I react to that? It completely turned the psychology of wrestling upside down. So it was a legitimate concern on wrestlers' part, those who were baby faces, because they just didn't know how to tell their story or get their character over anymore. But everybody adjusted, and it took some time. That's why I asked you about, the timing of this and what England is going to do. Are they going to abandon Bazball, or are they going to continue to try to find a way to win with it?
I think we saw a little bit. We saw a little bit that, at least with Ben Stokes and Harry Brook, they decided, well, you know what, we might try and just go back to what did work. But look, they've got a bit of time now. December 17th is the third test, so we look to see whether or not they've just thrown the playbook out at Noosa, or they've decided to just go all in and still commit. But we'd love to know what you have to say. Use the hashtag Stumps and Bumps on social media. We'll take a quick break because we've got a very, very big event happening in pro wrestling, the retirement of John Cena. We'll touch on that next, right here on Stumps and Bumps.
You're listening to Stumps and Bumps with Eric Bischoff and Bharat Sundaresan on SEN.
This is Stumps and Bumps on SEN. Eric Bischoff and Bharat Sundaresan with you. My name is Nibs Azor, and this weekend we'll be seeing the final in-ring appearance for John Cena in a wrestling ring. His retirement tour is finally coming to a close, and after more than 25 years as a competitor, this is it. His legendary career will be wrapped up at Saturday night's main event, and his final match is against Gunther, who earned the right to face Cena by defeating LA Knight in a tournament final, forcing a tap out. We talk about storytelling. This is just a brilliant way to put a bow on it, because you've got Gunther, the man who has made countless heroes submit versus John Cena, the man who never gives up. So it is going to be epic to see. But it got me thinking, because how will history look back at John Cena? Because throughout his career, he was always positioned as the top guy in the WWE, but he was almost released early in his career. A lot of people don't know that, but he overcome that to get the success that he has. But at the time he was the top guy, was not to the heights that we've seen The Rock or Hollywood Hogan or Stone Cold Steve Austin or Goldberg. He was very much the top guy during a cool period of the pro wrestling era. And Eric, you know that the business is cyclical. You've been in there at the complete peak where WCW was at its apex. You've been there even before that when, as you mentioned before, people were just coming in to get out of the rain. And you joined the WWE at a time where we were just coming out of the Monday Night Wars. It was still a pretty popular pastime and part of the cultural zeitgeist. But John Cena really had to carry the company on his back, didn't he? Because wrestling didn't have that cool factor that it did when he was the superstar.
Yeah, timing is such an important part. And I mean, wrestling, all forms of entertainment, I think, are cyclical. And especially when you're looking at one particular program, whether it's comedy or drama. And in this case, wrestling is a little bit of all. It's a little bit of sport, it's a little bit of comedy, it's a little bit of drama, and it's an action show. So you've got, those are four elements kind of all mashed into one thing called professional wrestling. And there are periods of time. Obviously, the Monday Night War era, starting from about 1995, when Nitro launched the first show head to head, all the way really through about 1999, even though it was so lopsided in favor of WWE by 1999. But that head-to-head competition created an unusually high level of interest, so high that I don't think we'll really ever see viewership as high on one night for professional wrestling ever as we did back then. I think it's historically, I don't think we'll ever reach the level of interest that professional wrestling had when there was that Monday Night War. WCW went away, the Monday Night War went away, and the quality of WWE programming remained high, and they were still very successful. But without that Monday Night War, without that good guy, bad guy, in some cases WCW was the bad guy. In some cases, in the eyes of the audience, WWE was the bad guy. Everybody had strong opinions. That was part of the fun. That was part of the overall experience, is debating, much like people debate sports teams or players on a team. There was that connectivity across the board with the wrestling audience. Once WCW went away, and it was really WWE by itself, that lack of energy, I guess, the back and forth and the debate, that lack of energy softened up viewership because it just wasn't as exciting as it had been. And John Cena was there at that point in time. Now, I want to make sure people understand WWE was incredibly successful from a financial perspective during John Cena's run, at the peak of his run. But it wasn't the same, to your point, Nims, as the Stone Cold Steve Austin era or the Rock era initially, or whatever however you want to compare it. But if you look at the success that John Cena has, and this is going to go to his legacy, or possibly to your next question, when people look back at John Cena, I don't think they're going to look back and say, yeah, but he was never quite as big a star as Stone Cold Steve Austin. Because John Cena's runway was a lot longer than Stone Cold Steve Austin's. I think in the aggregate, John Cena probably made more money than Stone Cold Steve Austin, because John Cena ultimately sold more tickets, sold more pay-per-views, sold more merchandise, not because he was a better talent necessarily, but because he was at it for a long time.
And
I
Bharat,
have sorry, Nims,
yeah, go on.
if I could jump in. Like, when you talk about Hulk Hogan in the 80s and Stone Cold and the NWO in the 90s, Eric, for someone who didn't grow up in America, it always felt like the biggest wrestling star kind of reflected what was happening in American society, where in the 80s, they needed real American hero. I mean, there were wars being fought all around the world. And then in the 90s was the grunge era where, like, authority was challenging authority was cool, and rap
Raging
music
Against
and
the
all of
Machine.
that. Yeah, Rage Against the
Yeah,
Machine.
anarchy rules.
Yeah.
Anarchy rules. So I'm very curious to know, Eric, like, did John Cena ever kind of connect with where American society was going at the start of the millennium, or where did he fit in, and what was American society at that point?
Well, I think, well, it's harder. I mean, I lived through it, obviously. There was nothing really, there was no one kind of movement. And maybe that's part of it. When John first kind of took on the thugonomics, hip
Mm,
hop kind of vibe, my opinion, he came in, it felt to me like a little bit late, and it
mm,
felt a little forced, or maybe it just felt forced, whether it was a little late or not. And he made it work because he's exceptionally talented. I mean, the man can rap. I mean,
Yeah.
it's real. He's
yeah.
good at it. And it was a natural character for him to play. And I think it was a very popular character, but it didn't connect on an emotional level. It connected very well on an entertainment level
Mm,
because it was visually fun to watch. It was great to listen to. The crowd could interact with him a little bit, and it was very relevant in terms of what the demographic, you know, was listening to and relating to at that time, not only in music, but in fashion, right? Which was a big part of it. And the presentation was extremely popular, but it never connected on an emotional level the way a Stone Cold Steve Austin did, or the way Hulk Hogan did, because as you pointed out, brought very clearly and succinctly that, yeah, the United States needed that true
mm,
American hero back in the 80s, right? And Hulk represented that. Stone Cold Steve Austin represented the, I don't want to say anarchy, but stick it to the man.
yeah.
Don't take crap from your boss, right?
Yeah.
People felt that. It created emotional connection. They could relate to that. Whereas John was more super entertaining, but people couldn't relate to it quite as well.
His biggest criticism was, oh, he's too good, he's perfect, he's super Cena. And
Mm,
when all the good things of a professional wrestler are listed as the negatives, it's almost an indication of exactly what you sort of meant, that the timing. And what I always find amazing is, so when you look at that roster through the WWE at that time, it was full of talent. You had some great people like Dolph Ziggler, Kofi Kingston, but the one that I want to specifically target is Rey Mysterio, because Rey Mysterio's had a fantastic run in the WWE from his debut in 2002 to now. He's won world titles. He's become a multi-time world champion in the WWE. But it's so funny that anytime you go and mention, because he was there just at that down period, when you talk about Rey Mysterio to, say, a casual fan or someone that might hover on the outskirts of professional wrestling, they're always talking about Halloween Havoc. They always talk about his time at the Filthy Animals. They always talk about this because the time that people remember is when wrestling was pop culture. Wrestling
mm,
was on TV guides. Wrestling was on Entertainment Weekly. It was on Leno. It was on Conan O'Brien. It was on magazine covers. You had people around water coolers talking about that. I know that's a very outdated reference, but it's just funny how, like, the tenure of Rey Mysterio's career has been longer in the WWE, but people still remember because that's the link that they've had when it was
mm,
a pop culture phenomenon.
I think it's partly that, in a large part that, but it's also people link to or reflect back on their first impressions. When did Rey Mysterio really, come onto
mm,
the scene in a big, loud, powerful way? And they were first introduced to the character and to the style of wrestling. They always remember that. It's kind of like, there's a saying, he who gets there first wins,
mm,
and Rey Mysterio was one of the first athletes, performers, to bring such a unique style of wrestling and the history and the culture of the luchadors, to bring it to a prime time, main event stage, so to speak. That's why people remember that, and the fact that I think Rey Mysterio, my opinion, but I'm biased, had some of his best matches in WCW back during that period of time, certainly with Eddie Guerrero. It's hard to go and find a Rey Mysterio match at any point in his career, in my opinion at least, and it's very subjective, I know. And I'm biased, I know that too. But I still believe, with all that considered, that Rey Mysterio and the action that Rey Mysterio provided during his WCW run, I think was the best work of his career.
Yeah, I think without doubt. Yeah, you're right. Last week, Eric, we compared him with your favorite cricketer, Temba Bavuma. The guy who fell. He's yeah. I mean, he's gone after Australia. He's beaten them. He's beaten India on Indian soil. And yeah, I think that's what it is. Right, the first impressions in entertainment and in sport, often even with a band, however big they get, people who knew them from the beginning always go to the first album, right? I think it's just how the human brain works. Just on Cena, to finish off, Eric. Yeah, you didn't work a lot with him, but you worked enough with him during your run at the WWE. So, is there a favorite moment or a memory on or off camera?
Yeah, there is, and I talked about it on social media a couple of weeks ago. The year I think was 2008. Could be wrong on the date, but Hulk Hogan, there's a Mardi Gras, which is a big festival in the United States in New Orleans, has a lot of history behind it and is known pretty much all over the world for being this crazy over the top 4 or 5 days party. It's tied to a religious, a Christian holiday, and but it's turned into a massive event. And every year, the people in New Orleans compete. They have these enormous floats, and they start working on them a year in advance. Long story short, Hulk Hogan was the captain of the crew. The crew is the people that are a part of this float and what this float represents. And there's a lot of history behind it, meaning behind it. So Hulk Hogan was a celebrity crew member, captain of the crew. I, of course, was with him during that period of time, as was my wife and others. And it was one big part. Had some of the best food I've ever had in my life. We were treated like kings. It was an unbelievably exciting experience. But on the one night during the peak of the Mardi Gras celebration, and it is a drunken mess. It is a drunken mess. And we were up on a balcony. You can Google images of Mardi Gras. Just enter Mardi Gras /beads. You'll see what I mean.
Right.
And the streets down below us were filled with people, most of them women flashing their breasts so that we would throw them beads, because for some reason that's part of the experience. I don't know. But hey, Rome,
exactly, yeah.
So we were up there, drinking beer and having a good time. It was a very, festive kind of crazy atmosphere. And security came and got me, and they said, Mr. Bischoff, there's somebody at the door. And I said, well, if he's not part of our group, then, tell him thanks for stopping by, but move along. And the security guard came back again. I guess he won't go. He says, you know him. I said, well, what was his name? And he said, John. I said, all right, let me just go handle this and I'll come back. Throw some more beads. Have another beer. And I went to the door, and it was John Cena. And that was, John was a star at that point, but not quite as big of a star as he later became, but definitely a major star. And he came to the door and he said, Eric, I just want to pay my respects, say hello to Hulk, whatever, just pay his respects. John came in, walked up, shook hands with Hulk Hogan. They had a brief conversation, and he turned around and walked out. He wasn't there to party. He wasn't there to share in the attention. He wasn't there to share on the spotlight. He came over specifically. He found out where we were just to say hello and to pay respects to Hulk Hogan. That, to me, said a lot about who John Cena is, because anybody else that I've ever worked with would have wanted to come and be up there on that balcony and just be, there were news cameras up there, and it was a media, right? Most professional wrestlers I know would have liked to have been a part of that. And John stayed away from the cameras, walked in, said a few words, paid his respect, and turned around and walked out the door. And I thought, that is one classy human being.
That's awesome. And the other question, Eric, especially in professional sport, that gets asked when you're talking about an all-time legend or someone with the longevity of John Cena is, how would, and you fantasy book, don't you? Like, how would he have gone in another era? So is John Cena, in your opinion, a wrestler who would have fit into the 80s and in even the 90s? I mean, he sort of got it like in the early 2000s, so just at the start of the century or start of the millennium. But do you think he's one of those who could have fit in any era?
100%. Don't doubt that at all. Because number one, John has a charisma that fits in any era. Charisma is the one ingredient. You can't put it in a box. You can't put it in a bottle. You can't make a candy bar out of it. You can't put it in a pill. Can't take a shot of charisma.
Mhm.
It's something that, God has blessed you with or not. It's part of your DNA, so to speak. John has so much charisma, and that charisma works in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and beyond, obviously. He not only has the charisma, he has the discipline and the work ethic. And when you combine, and the look, obviously. So when you combine those things, the charisma, the discipline, the work ethic, um, and the look, yeah, John Cena would have been a star in any generation.
And I'm so glad that he gets to go out. Two things. He gets to go out on his own terms, and the cycles finally come around. But pro wrestling is almost once again not to the levels that it was on at the Monday Night Wars, because those metrics will never ever be met again. Just in the same vein that there will never be another cultural phenomenon like a Seinfeld or a Friends.
Mm.
We're not going to get that with professional wrestling because, that's just how the world is now. But I'm glad that he was able to do a final tour, see the company that at the time, as you sort of said, was at a low point, at a high point now, and that he kind of can get his flowers and enjoy the fruits of his labor. So Saturday night's main event should be a very, very emotional time, and we look forward to seeing what that brings us with the WDA, because I know they're going to make him go out with a bang. But we need to go out with a bang pretty soon, because before we leave, the IPL player auction is coming up next week. And Bharat, for those that are playing at home, just give a quick little, a quick Cliff Notes version of the IPL player auction, because this is now into its 16th year, give or take.
It is. And these auctions, so the way it works is every 3 or 4 years, you have the big auction where teams, the franchises are allowed to only retain 5 or 6 players, and there's a bigger pool of players, and as a result, a bigger purse that each franchise goes in for these auctions, for the big auctions, where they have to literally restructure the whole team. But these auctions in between, those big auctions, are the ones where you'll see players make the big sums of money, because more or less the team is set. So there'll be some in this year's auction. Chennai and Kolkata have released a lot of players, so they have the bigger purse. But they're trying to fit very specific or fill specific holes in their team. So often, and Eric would like the business side of it, player agents, what they used to do is tell their players, maybe sit out of the big auction, wait for the mini auctions in the 3 years in between, because that's where you'll get the bigger payday. And that's just clever, player management and business sense. So the guy, he is Australian. He is playing in the test team right now. Who could really benefit from that this year, Nims, is Cameron Green. So he was injured last year, so he doesn't have a franchise. And with two major retirements in Glenn Maxwell and Andre Russell, Cameron Green, with his white ball skills, the way he's hitting the ball, and is being an all-rounder, yeah, he could be looking at crazy money. He could be looking at $4 or $5 million this year. Life-changing at a time when Cam Green is preparing for his wedding. It couldn't come at a better time. Imagine, I think he'll wait for the auction before he decides where he'll go for a honeymoon, or if he could just buy his own island where he could go on a honeymoon for.
And the best part about this IPL auction is we often see breakout stars too, because someone like an Ashton Agar from Australia, a fringe player, this is the time when they could make a real pay packet because they'll be there for the entire tournament. You sometimes think, like, to put it, if we put it into, say, like NBA perspective, if you could have LeBron James for, say, 3 games of the season, or you can have, say, someone straight out of college for the full
Mhm.
season and at a less pay packet, that's the sort of players that you sort of keep your eye on. And Brad, is there anyone that you think that might be bubbling under the radar?
I think a couple of the South Africans could well be in that mix because they have had a good run. South Africa, they've gone to the last T20 World Cup final. So even if it's not a new name, someone like a David Miller, who's a proven performer, but never really has been counted in the top tier of cricketers, he could be in line for the biggest payday of his life. And that's the thing that has happened since the conception of the IPL, the birth of the IPL, where players' lives, whether you're playing for your national team or not, that's where cricket economics has changed, where you could be an outsider in that sense, like outsider, like Scott Hall or Kevin Nash, and you could end up with the biggest payday. Eric knew it all along back then. Yeah, he knew how to kind of promote guys on the fringe and turn them into superstars. But that's what the IPL has done for cricket. And yeah, it's changed the whole motivation of who wants to be a cricketer and how you want to build your own career. And the IPL auction is an annual reminder of that.
Yeah.
How much does the auction affect the outlook for the teams for the season? I mean, are bettors paying attention to the auction? Are they betting pre-auction on the outcomes that are happening post-auction or not?
It's become a thing in the last 5 or 6 years, Eric. It wasn't initially. It was a shock to the system. Like, it's like players being sold off like cattle. Like, yeah, all these rich industrialists are just sitting there raising their paddle. And I think people were not sure what to expect of it. And then the pay packets started growing up and up and up. And I think we're still a week out from the auction. But as you get closer to the auction, you'll see the betting markets get into the scene as well, where so the way it also works, the auction is there'll be the top tier players where there'll be 20 names that'll go into the mix to start with. And then there'll be another 300 players, what they call a rapid auction. So their names might be in the auction, but unless teams have written down their names and asked the auctioneer to bring up their names, it won't come up. So for those top 20 names, the market will, I don't know whether it decides or not, but it'll have a say. And it's fun if you are thrown that way to bet on, because you're not just betting on who will go for the biggest prize, but how much you're going for and which franchise you're going for as well. So it is a fun, and like the WWE Hall of Fame, it started off as a Hall of Fame and now it's a TV product. The IPL auction itself has become a TV product, Eric, and it does incredible numbers around the world.
I bet it does.
And make sure
Especially with
that
the amount of money that's wagered on cricket, as we
Yeah.
talked about a couple of weeks ago. We're talking significant amount of money, so I can imagine why it's become its own television product.
And just to
Yeah.
give you a little bit of context, we talk about Cameron Green. He's one of the players that have listed basically his base price, his reserve price in US dollars is $222,000. That's the starting price. So
Into 50 at least, yeah, by the time he's bought by the and to your point, Eric, because of the money that is wagered on the IPL, so those people keep a keen eye on the IPL auction because they have a lot riding on the auction as well, like who goes where and what team could be. Because unlike, say, the AFL, which is the Aussie Rules Football League, which is more democratic in that sense, the IPL is whoever has the most money and
yeah,
whoever pays the
biggest
most
purse.
money to get biggest purse wins in many ways. So, which is it's based more on the American model. So, as a result, the IPL auction is also keenly observed by all those people. Like, because this IPL is what, 4 months away, but what happens a week from now can often decide how the respective team's going to go in 3 or 4 months' time. So, there'll be a lot of interest from all parties.
It is going to be an insane, and like you said, it is a TV event, so we'll keep you posted. But just keep with those names if you're keen on seeing who's going to go where. Cameron Green and David Miller from South Africa. Just put those in your back pocket there. But we've run out of time here on Stumps and Bumps. And just a quick reminder, be a part of the show anytime you want. Tweet us, use the hashtag Stumps and Bumps. You can follow Bharat and Eric on their social media accounts as well. Bharat, as you've mentioned, you've been a busy bee on radio, TV, in print as well. But Eric, you have also been busy, and you will be even busier too, because Real American Freestyle, they had a absolutely stellar event in Chicago just last weekend, where Michael Chandler got the win against Chad Mendes. Some very, very big names coming on board. And you also announced RAF 4, which is going to be happening in about 10 days' time, or just over 10 days' time. So, boy, you don't like to, when you talk about lighting a fire, you really like to keep those embers burning, don't you?
Well, let's just say we didn't have a lot of choice. We came up to shoot a few months ago, and we had to take whatever buildings we could get on short notice. So that's just the way things have worked out. We're gonna have obviously December 20th is our next event, and we're gonna follow that a couple days later on January 10th. And then we're going to take a break till the end of February. So I'll get about a 6-week break there between January 10th and the end of February, where I can at least breathe a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll find something else in that period, Eric. I know you too well.
Well, and by the way, if it's not available yet, we just started. We either have started or will start posting the full length event.
Oh.
On our YouTube channel, our international YouTube channel. So you can just go to Real American Freestyle on YouTube, and outside of the US, you'll be able to see the entire event. So it'll give you a chance to see what we did last time.
Awesome. Right.
There's some very big names of the world of MMA and former UFC guys that are getting involved too. And it's not just even some stellar female athletes. The list of talent just keeps be growing and growing, and it's going absolute gangbusters. But make sure you follow Eric on social media at eBischoff to see what he's doing. You can tune into his podcast, 83 Weeks, part of the adfreeshows.com family as well. But on behalf of us here at Stumps and Bumps, we have had an absolute blast, and we'll do it all again same time next week right here on SEN.